And we begin this hour with the just-released 911 tapes of the call from that incident that led to the arrest of Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates, Jr. Let's listen to more.
Happening. I just had an older woman standing here, and she had noticed two gentlemen trying to get in a house at that number, 17 Ware Street, and they kind of had to barge in, and they broke the screen door, and they finally got in. And when I had looked, I went further closer to the house a little bit after the gentlemen were already in the house. I noticed two suitcases. So I'm not sure if these are two individuals who actually work there, who live there.
You think they might have been breaking?
I don't know, because I have no idea.
NBC's Ron Allen is live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Ron, thanks for joining us. Thanks for all of your reporting on this and putting it into context. One of the striking things about the call and listening to the complete tape, as much as we've been able to listen to, is that the caller, the neighbor, never mentions race and has a lot of doubts. She says, I don't know if they live there. She refers to them as individuals, as gentlemen. She is not as alarmed as we might have been led to believe.
Indeed, Andrea, and when you listen to the tapes, it sounds like a very routine police call. The other thing that stood out for me is that the caller said that an older woman pointed out to her what was going on, or she would not have noticed it. And I had not heard mention of that older woman before, and we don't know who she is or what she saw. We've not heard her account of the story. But you're right, the caller did not mention that the men were black, which is how it had been first reported, and she was trying to clarify that today because she felt that she was being cast as a racist individual in the media accounts of all this. But again, it is a very routine call. We also heard some of the police transmissions that were going on while the incident was happening, and there was some speculation that you might have heard Professor Gates in the background raising his voice. We didn't hear anything like that. We didn't hear anything from him at all, and we heard very little from Officer Crowley as well during the process. So the tapes, while interesting in giving us some insight into the state of mind of the caller, they don't tell us much about what was going on when the incident actually happened.
As you point out, they're not really dispositive, but they certainly indicate that the caller was not injecting race into this from the get-go, that whatever happened between the two men once they got there.
Exactly, and that's what everybody has been saying about this. Somehow this confrontation between these two individuals escalated, and it was largely about the two of them. Another unanswered question is what happened to all the other officers who were there. At one point in the call, you hear Sergeant Crowley say to keep the units coming. At a point after he has already said that the individual has given me an ID that says he's Henry Louis Gates, Jr., that the officer still calls for the cops to keep coming. At one point, he also calls for the Harvard police to show up. So again, we're still just listening to all this and breaking it down, but there's nothing of Professor Gates on the tape. There's very little of Officer Crowley, and it all sounds very routine, but clearly we know that it escalated into a major confrontation that ended up in a disorderly conduct arrest for what clearly was not a break-in, and escalated into a national dialogue argument, if you will, about race in this country. Andrea?
And what Robert Gibbs indicated at his briefing this morning to the White House press corps was that beer with the president and Officer Crowley and Professor Gates may take place within the next few days. I think they're going to try to get that done very quickly and get things back to normal, or at least try to get things back to normal. Maureen Dowd, in her column yesterday, in her signature way, says that from Shakespeare to Hitchcock, mistaken identity makes for a powerful narrative. A police officer who is proud of his reputation for getting along with black officers and for teaching cadets to avoid racial profiling feels maligned to be cast as a racist white Boston cop. A famous professor who studies identity in Summers and Martha's Vineyard feels maligned to be cast as a black burglar with backpack and crowbar. So she gets to the point of identity and how each of these individuals felt put off for different reasons, and people reacted perhaps to stereotypes, and it escalated from there.
Indeed, Andrea. There's a point in this confrontation where Sergeant Crowley understands that this is, in fact, Professor Gates' home and that there is not a break-in. And a lot of people have asked, why didn't the officer just walk away at that point? But apparently something happened between them. Words were exchanged, or as Professor Gates has indicated in some of his interviews, perhaps he didn't say enough or he didn't say anything. But something happened that moved this to cross the line of disorderly conduct. And the police have really never explained what exactly that was. in one of their press conferences, they did point out that defining what constitutes disorderly conduct is one of the more difficult decisions that a police officer has to make. And we know that they're concerned about their safety throughout this entire situation because Officer Crowley doesn't really know what's going on. But again, there still are a lot of questions about all this that the tapes don't really answer. Andrea?
Ron Allen in Cambridge, thanks so much.